Lycka till på färden! Cykla snabbt, cykla bra,
It's great to visit these mountain bike events because you can always steal a demo bike or two. And today I found a 2022 Top Fuel. So this is the 2022 Top Fuel. It sits somewhere in between the Excalibur and the Fuel EX. This bike actually overlaps the Fuel EX a bit, at least if you look at the geometry. But still, it's not a proper trail bike, and it's not a cross-country bike either, as the previous versions was. So I'll explain why. The geometry is pretty progressive. It's got a 66-degree head angle, and it's also got quite a long reach. It's 480 millimeters in size large, and the chainstays are pretty short. They're 435. I think that previous Top Fuel also was 435 in the rear. So this is the aluminium version. There is a carbon version as well, of course. So both bikes has got this banana compartment, and it's great to see that the aluminium versions also have this feature. I think that is very useful for storing the necessary bits and pieces that you need on a ride. So this bike is very progressive when you look at the geometry, but where it differs from many other of these lightweight trail bikes is the stack height. And the stack height is even lower than on the specialized Epic Evo that I have been testing a couple of times. So the front end is very low on this bike, which means that you lean over the bike like on a cross-country bike. Now Trek sort of condones, if you can say it like that, that you can use a 130mm fork. That will change things a bit, then you get the front end up quite a bit. And there's also some spaces there. But still, I think the rise on these handlebars is quite enough, actually, to be honest. I wouldn't want to have more rise on that handlebar. Forgot to mention the suspension travel is 120, both front and rear. I think the previous version had 115 in the rear. But this shock that is used on the 2022 version has got a longer stroke. The rear suspension is interesting to look at, both in the carbon and in the aluminium version. It looks the same. And what sort of differs this bike from other bikes with this type of suspension is that this linkage sits quite far forward. It's in front of the bottom bracket, and supposedly that should improve the climbing characteristics of this bike, which basically means that you will have a consistent anti-squat throughout the stroke. In the front it's the RockShox SID fork, and since this is a 120mm fork, it's a different dimension of the stanchion. It's 35mm compared to the 32mm, I think, on the 100mm SID, RockShox SID fork. Could be a bit confusing, but it's great to see that it's pretty stiff fork on this sort of trail bike. One good thing is that despite the short chainstay length, it's 435mm, there's still room for a wider tire. These tires are 2.4, but you could fit a 2.5-inch tire here, but I think anything more than 2.6 might be a stretch. The dropper is 150mm. It looks as if there is room for some extra travel, actually. A larger dropper, which is always great once you've gotten used to 160, 170mm droppers. It's difficult to get back to 150, even if that may be enough on this type of bike. I'm not really friends with this dropper lever though. It's quite a long stroke and it's a bit flimsy, I don't know. Not my cup of tea really, but it works. One thing that is great with the most Trek bikes is that there is a knock block which prevents any damage to the frame in the event of a crash. I think all bikes, especially the carbon bikes with their expensive frames, need some sort of knock block or protection. And as I said earlier, it's great to see a banana compartment even on aluminium bikes nowadays. It's a great little add-on, and in here there's plenty of room for a spare tube, and there's also plenty of room for a multi-tool and perhaps even a banana. And of course it doubles as a bottle holder. And it's great to see some down tube protection as well. I don't know that much about the wheels. They are 30mm wide. The tires I have tested before quite a few times. They work okay. Not the most aggressive mud tire really. Today is really wet in the woods, and maybe there you would want to have something else, I don't know. But for regular trail riding, cross-country riding, they are absolutely perfect. Nothing to complain about there. So, enough talking, let's go for a ride, shall we? So this is like a short travel trail bike, but with the cross-country seating position. It's quite low in the front end, but the stem is rather short. It looks like a 50mm stem. And with this steep seat post, this is of course a very good climbing position. And the rear suspension is almost as if it is in a lock mode. I actually need to check that. No, it was correct. There's no pedal bob whatsoever in the rear of this bike. But of course there's a trade-off with that. And it's probably quite firm when going downhill. Right, so I'm standing up pedaling. It's very steep here. Yeah, just a little bit of pedal bob when you're standing up. Of course there's a limit to what 120mm of rear suspension travel can do. So I'm suspecting it's a bit firm when going downhill at some speed. So let's try that. Yeah, it's pretty good actually, pretty plush. I'll take that back. It's not that firm in the rear. Well, it's firm enough to take these small bumps. And yeah, feels alive and active, this rear suspension. That's what I like. There's some pop to it. I just found a downhill trail. That's perfect. Let's give it a go. So it's a test of suspension, geometry and tires. Let's go. Oh, yep. I'm used to grippier tires, but sure, it works okay. Yeah, of course, there will never be like an aggressive mud tire, these tires, but we got down. Feels pretty versatile, this bike. Feels as if it can tackle these small rocks, stuff like that. But I'm thinking I could make this to a proper trail bike if I just move those spacers to get the handlebar up a bit. Come in! Yep, time's up, time to get back. I wish I could have this bike for a little bit longer. Maybe there will be an opportunity later on. I'm concluding by saying that this is a very nice trail bike. Of course it is, usually it's from Trek. No surprises there really. So I'm thinking I'm going to do a comparison video between this bike and the Specialized Epic Evo, as I think this bike is the main contender to the Epic Evo. So let me hear what you think in the comments below. So see you in the next video.